Tara, are we ready?
We are, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. As of Sunday evening, there have been 7,984 confirmed COVID-19 cases in Washington. We have lost 338 Washingtonians to this virus. A little over 3 weeks ago, my office, along with Superintendent Reykdal, who has joined me today, closed our on-site K-12 education statewide in our early efforts to flatten the curve of this virus. Today, I'm extending the on-site instruction closure order. All public and private K-12 schools in our state will be ending, they'll be stopped from providing traditional in-person instruction through the end of this school year in June. But all schools will continue distance learning until the end of the school year. This decision is made on the clear epidemiological evidence that in order to give us a higher degree of confidence that we will suppress this pandemic, we simply cannot take the chance of reopening on-site instruction in this calendar school year. We do believe we're making some progress in our state, and Washingtonians should be proud of this. It's reasonable to expect this time will give us what we need to feel secure we have come through the worst of this pandemic. Our efforts are as important as the curve of the pandemic goes down as they were when the curve was going up. And this school closure is part and parcel of those efforts, not only to flatten the curve as it goes up, but to reduce the number of deaths that occur as it goes down. We cannot risk losing the gains we have made after the peak of this pandemic presumably will have passed. This closure order will also allow educators to fully focus their energies and their amazing creative talents on the best way to provide education to their students in this challenging circumstance. I've spoken to local and superintendents across the state as recently this morning about how this will impact their communities. This decision, like every decision we've made during this crisis, is very difficult. I've also heard directly from educators, parents, and students about how the current closure is affecting them and their families' lives. If you're a senior in good standing, we expect that you will receive your diploma this year. And I've seen school communities come together in really amazing ways. For example, since the statewide closure began in mid-March, our schools have served more than 2 million meals to young people who need them. We have bus drivers delivering meals to student homes, educators who are volunteering to hand out meals at school sites, and sending parents home with multiple days' worth of meals at one time in order to limit the exposure of others. The creativity of people is really amazing in our state. And our school districts are rising to the challenge of caring for the children of our healthcare workers and our first responders, our pharmacy workers and our grocery store workers. They've served more than 2,000 children in the very first week of operation and are making several more thousand openings available. We know nationally at least 13 states and territories have closed their schools for the remainder of the school year, with many converting their traditional in-person instructional model to a distance or online model. Now, I do want to be clear about this. Transforming a traditional school and fully delivering instruction at a distance or through an online portal is no small feat. Our traditional learning model has been nearly 150 years in the making. We know that distance learning could never replace the learning and other benefits that students get from attending school in person. But this unprecedented health emergency demands that we take this step, both for the sake of our children and for our community. I'm asking districts and educators to do your best during this tough time, to perfect as much as possible a distance learning model. And we've also got to ensure that our seniors have the opportunity to get the credits they need to graduate. Now, students, if I can speak to you just for a second, your grades will not suffer because of this, but we need you to do your part too. Your educators will continue teaching, though it will look different, certainly, than what you're used to. And I really hope you can use this moment to embrace learning. When you're older, I think you'll be glad you did. And I got to tell you, I've seen amazing learning going on of students looking at new arts and new sciences and new ways of doing things. It's really been inspiring to me to see students really using this time in really, really creative ways to maybe try things they've never tried before. I appreciate that, including my young grandson who just started his life list of bird watching. So far he's got 3 finches, 1 robin, and 3 crows. So things are moving forward. I expect our local education associations to be flexible in the collective bargaining agreements and to work closely with their superintendents and school board members to determine the best path forward. And I think it's fair that we all expect school districts to provide some flexibility too in your expectations of staffs and students. Together, we will ensure that learning continues in the state of Washington. Now, we are working with our internet providers and software leaders in our state and other private sector partners to connect our students and educators for what they need in teaching. We have partners in higher education and schools and libraries that are also helping us set up interconnected hotspots in urban and rural areas across the state. And we're going to ask all those partners to step up to the plate to the extent humanly possible to get as many kids well connected as humanly possible in the state of Washington. We know closing schools also presents challenges in the need for equity in education, and not only because of internet connectivity issues. Students learning English as a second language, students with disabilities, and other vulnerable students, we know this is a challenging time for their learning. So we are addressing this by allowing limited school activity for those students in school buildings that really follow social distancing guidelines, similar to the Department of Health guidelines for childcare. And I'm asking school and community leaders to help us in ensuring access for these students. For any children watching today, it would be very normal to feel a little anxious about all this, not getting to see your friends as much as you want, and we understand that. And I'd like to invoke the words from a fellow who may be even before some of the students' time, named Mr. Fred Rogers. And what he said was, everyone has lots of ways of feeling, and all those ways of feeling are fine. It's what we do with our feelings that matter. And I want you to know that we're going to get through this. You're just as important in this effort as your parents and your grandparents, and we look forward to your bright futures. Now, if there's any opportunity to bring students back for a few days later in the year, including graduation ceremonies for our seniors, we're going to explore that option as the evidence continues to come in. That opportunity will be guided by our collective behavior and the success we achieve with the choices that we're making today. So stay home, stay healthy, wash your hands, and now I'll defer to the superintendent, who has been such a tremendous partner in going through these challenges.
Thank you, Governor Inslee. I'm Superintendent of Public Instruction Chris Rakedahl, and I thank the Governor for his leadership. Washington State acted very early on a number of fronts that has helped us begin to address the essential need to flatten the curve, as we talk about. These are difficult times, and this is a tough day for us in Washington State. I take heart that the concern we have heard from parents and students and teachers and administrators, school board members, and community members about closing schools is a function of how deeply ingrained it is into our Washington way of life. We know the value of school and the power of learning, and people are nervous about that. We are one of 50 states who are closed now. We are one of now 14 states who have closed for the rest of the school year. Our neighbors, Oregon and Idaho, are contemplating it as we speak, and we expect dozens of additional states to close for the rest of the year. That's more than 50 million students around the nation who are not learning in a traditional model, and we are fortunate to have a framework here of high expectations, which we rolled out last week, and you saw in each of our communities a significant uptick in the amount of family engagement and student engagement around learning. Prior to that, as you heard from the governor, more than 2 million meals were served in the first 10 days or so of our shutdown. 4,000 plus child care slots were made available. About 2,000 plus students are currently being served with additional capacity. And learning around the state has moved forward. From Highline to Aberdeen, from Bellingham to Vancouver, Spokane, Moses Lake, White River School District. The list goes on. Incredible learning opportunities for families, a significant engagement by our staff, and I want to thank our school districts around the state who are continuing to improve and get better in our distance model. The contemplation here for me is a tough one, as it has been for the governor, because we also want to always keep in mind that while learning is paramount duty to the state, the health of our people is first and foremost. The return to school is a very difficult contemplation. If you can imagine coming out of this the way we went into it, you can understand the challenge of people wanting to rush too soon back to school. The second there would be a case of a student or a faculty member, the entire school would be shut down. We would clean it for 2 to 5 days. We would have to trace and track as many of those contacts as possible. A rush back to school puts significant risk in learning continuity that at this time would not be better than the model we are developing and advancing at a distance. We do not want that curve to suddenly spike up because we acted too quickly to come back. It does call into question this fall, and we have been candid and given signals to folks for a long time that because of the leadership of our governor, he is doing an incredible job flattening that curve and making the people of the state of Washington safer. But when you lower the curve and flatten the curve, you do it for longer. And so we are already trying to contemplate what life means like coming back to school in the fall as both a traditional face-to-face model, should we get the right science in our favor, but also we know we have to be significantly better at this distance model in case we find ourselves in that reality. I am personally challenging the private sector partners that I've been working with and the governor's been working with and others, particularly in telecom. We have to get connectivity to all of our students. This is a once-in-a-100-year pandemic that compels us to do this today more than ever, but there will be something else. Natural disaster, significant weather events, future disease. This is a big moment for us to transform. And I am reminded of our 6th superintendent of the state of Washington. Her name was Josephine Preston. She was the first female superintendent elected in the state and the first statewide elected official who was a woman. She was a suffragist who helped bring the important right of voting to women in the state. In the middle of her own pandemic crisis in the beginning of her 2nd term, she not only mustered the strength and the wisdom to lead the school system through that, but she sowed the seeds of something that today we would think is incredibly normal, but it was quite innovative at the time. This particular superintendent in the midst of a pandemic said, when we come out of this, we ought to be different. It was the seeds of kindergarten in our state. It was the seeds of an amazing concept called middle school and high school, which did not exist 100 years ago in the way we know it today. She was a leader. And from the seeds of crisis come the strong, strong roots and blossom of innovation. And that's the moment we find ourselves in today. The disease is compelling us to have an education challenge, but our task is to rise to it, to engage our families and our students, to continue learning, get our students moved to their next grade, get our seniors graduated to incredible opportunities, and to forever transform our system for a better opportunity should it come and emerge in the future. In the next decade, this state ought to lead the country in a belief that not only should everyone have access to health care, which we have clearly been a leader on nationally, but if there is anyone today who does not see telecom and connectivity as an essential utility, much like water and clean air, then I would challenge them to think about our history. Right now, we must sow the seeds of a complete innovation and connectivity for families. It is the way we will learn. It is the way of the future. We will never replace face-to-face learning. It is the best model for all its comprehensive supports. But right now, this is our moment to connect every family and see it as much as a right to be connected as clean water. Thank you, and I know the governor and I stand for questions.
Is it the University of Washington analysis or something else? And then a question for Superintendent Reichdahl. Are all of the school districts currently up to speed on distance learning, or are there areas you'd like to see improvement in the coming weeks?
Yes, we use data from all around the world, starting at the University of Washington, the Institute, which is really recognized as the modeling institute in the world today. We're so fortunate to have them available. We call them when we want advice. I talked to Dr. Murray a few days ago about the specifics of his model. We look at other models from other modeling agencies. We look at our daily data, including the rate of hospitalizations that happen that day that have COVID-like symptoms. We watch that with intense interest. What percentage of the admissions are people who had COVID-like illnesses? We look at our rate of positive test results that come in. We obviously look at our fatalities. We look at our traffic data from a variety of sources, first from the Department of Transportation on our roadways, and we have good data on that from our ferries, from our light rail and bus systems. We also look at telephonic and network connections that are modeled. I know this will trouble someone, but some people, but people's location is actually tracked, and you can determine what distances they've traveled. That's anonymous, so we have no idea who these folks are. But we look at that to determine how many social interactions or physical interactions, how much that's been reduced because of our Stay Home, Stay Healthy initiative. Then we look at all of those things together to look at trends. Obviously, trends are more important than an individual data point. Those trends have been trending somewhat favorable for us. I think you've heard Dr. Birx for the administration noting this on a national basis, that our trend lines are favorable, particularly relative to other states. But I do want to reiterate this. Our fatalities are still going up. We have not reached the peak of this pandemic. And we don't know where that peak is. And between us and that peak are, unfortunately, the loss of lives of Washingtonians. And that's why we ought to remain very committed to all we're doing. Second point I want to make, and this is really important in the context of this school closure issue. As the curve goes up, all of us are intensely focused on what is happening in fatalities and infection rates and the like. But you can have the same number of fatalities on the backside of that curve as it's going down. So we have to be intensely committed to this, even as the rate of fatalities per day will go down, and we hope that's sooner rather than later. So there will be a very human kind of inclination to pop the champagne corks and go back to visiting our friends and going back to school once we're past that curve, but we just can't do that. It's too deadly. And that's one of the reasons we made this decision.